This is a series of webinars that the Learning House sponsors, and we have archived copies of previous ones. You're welcome to go to our website. You can look up webinars that have been earlier in this series. The recordings are there and the slides and so forth. And the slides from this presentation will be available after we conclude the webinar today, and then the audio recording of the webinar will be available in about 24 hours. So if you want to share this with friends or you can't sit through all of it today, you can still get a copy. I want to remind you that we're anxious to get participation today. This topic is one that really lends itself to ideas and suggestions and comments from the audience. Many of the ideas I'm going to share with you about strategies to grow online programs come out of my conversations with partners that we work with. The Learning House works with over 100 different colleges and universities throughout the country, and many of the ideas I want to share today come from them. So I'm sure some of you have great ideas as well, and you can contribute to our overall learning. Just a quick background about myself. I spent 15 years in traditional higher education, was with a private college in the Midwest where we were early adopters of online programs. And then I spent about 10 years in the market-driven side, or the for-profit side of higher ed, working with big online universities. So it's a nice opportunity to share with you some of my experience today, but also ideas that I've picked up in my work here at the Learning House. So if you want to participate, you can raise your hand on your screen there. If you raise your hand, we can call on you, and then you'll be able to talk, and everybody will hear you. So we can have a little bit of dialogue in some cases. Or if you prefer not to speak, but just to send a question in or a comment, you can type those in the chat feature that we're using now to remind people to use the telephone. And we'll try to read as many of those and respond to those as we can. As in past webinars, I'm going to end at 2 o'clock, the formal part of the presentation, but then we'll stay on for another 30 minutes past that. So if people want to stick around and ask questions and have more dialogue, we're sure glad to do that. So with that, let's begin the session today. And I want to start with this slide, which some of you may have seen before. I've used this in a couple different presentations. It emphasizes the kind of current state of online programs in U.S. higher ed. There was this period of time in the decade between 2000 and 2010 which was dominated largely by the mission-driven university or market-driven universities, but there were also some nonprofit traditional universities that were developing online programs back in this time period and growing very rapidly. The growth was phenomenal in this period of time. For example, I worked at Catchment University for part of that time. We went from 1,500 students to over 70,000 students. University of Phoenix went from around 100,000 to 400,000 approximately in that time period. The demographers estimated that there were over 60 million adults in the U.S. Back in that time period that needed and wanted a college degree, but were not able, for a variety of reasons, to attend a traditional university. So the advent of online programs, fully online degrees, really met a big need for these people. Many of them came and got their degrees and so forth in this time period. So it was a time that there was almost no discrimination, to be honest with you. If you could offer a degree and if you could get people to work the phones and handle inquiries, you could recruit students and you could grow as fast as you could hire staff to handle the admissions phone calls, basically. Well, that all came to a kind of a screeching halt here in the last couple of years. The market-driven sector has really fallen on hard times. Part of that was the result of new regulations from the U.S. Department of Ed, but I think more importantly, it was increased competition from other, in many cases, mission-driven nonprofit institutions that have been started now or beginning more and more to move into this space and offer online degrees. It's also true that the market became saturated. Most of those 60 million adults have been contacted. If they expressed any interest by one or two admissions counselors, many of them decided they didn't want to go to a market-driven institution, so they're still available out there. There are companies that are called lead aggregators that assist with enrolling students in online programs. These companies advertise on the web, and as they accumulate prospects, they sell those prospects as leads to any university or college that wants to buy them. Well, the lead aggregators have experienced a real tightening in their business as well. So it's not just the regulations that came down from the U.S. Department of Ed, but the market is saturated. There's a lot of competition now, especially among the for-profit market-driven schools, and there aren't as many people inquiring as there once were. So what's going to happen next? I think we're in this second stage, the second decade of this land rush or the rush into online programs, but now it's not a national issue where you have large universities like University of Phoenix or Catchment or DeVry or University of Maryland, University College working across the whole U.S. What we see is a lot of regional competition, so to speak. And the question is who's going to dominate or who's going to own the largest market share of these smaller regional markets. We did a research study earlier this year called Online College Students 2012, and I'll quote it a couple times in this presentation, but you're more than welcome to go to our website at learninghouse.com and download the full research report. We interviewed 1,500 students that were enrolled in fully online programs, and we found that 80% of them attend a college or university within 100 miles of where they live. So even though they go online, they tend to stay close to home. There's a variety of reasons for that we'll get into maybe in a different time, but it's a regional effort. And so if you're an institution, you need to look at who the competition is within your region. The University of Phoenix is everywhere, but there may be 2 or 3 other public or nonprofit institutions within 100 miles of your campus or more. That's going to be primarily your competition. And the question now is, who's going to own that space? Who's going to own this particular region? And if you go out 100 miles, maybe 200 miles, you start to see where your influence fades, where your reputation fades, and you're going to be less likely to attract students. So the question for today that I want to share is some ideas on how you can be first, if you're not already there, or how you can be a major player and own a big chunk of the market within your particular region where your institution is located. So there's 3 ways to do this that I can think of, and these are the only 3 ways. One, you can do better marketing. If you've got programs out there online now, you can do a better job of communicating those to people. You can do a better job of responding to inquiries. If it's taking you 2 weeks to get back to a prospect, you can cut that down to 2 days, and you'll do better. You can also do better retention. If you've got students in the program already, a way to increase or to grow your programs is just to retain those students longer. Keep them through to graduation. If you have a 75% graduation rate now, if you can bump that up to 80, it's one of the easiest ways actually to increase the size of your programs. We actually have a webinar coming up in a couple months that's going to focus on retention strategies. The third way you can do this is to expand. You can offer more programs in different subject fields. You can expand your territory or the people that you talk to within that territory. And that's going to be the focus today on this presentation. It's not about better marketing or better retention. Those are coming later. Today we're going to focus on how to expand. And before we get into the actual strategies, and I've got 6 general strategies for us to consider, I want to show you this slide. Again, this comes from the research study that we did. But before we do that, I'm sorry, I forgot we had this poll in here. I want to find out how many programs you folks that are involved in the webinar today are actually running, so I get an idea of how far advanced you are. So we're going to put a poll up here, and you can answer on your screen there, and I see the answers coming in already. You see the questions there on the right-hand side. We'll take just a minute for everybody to make their selection. You can see the results. It's kind of interesting as they come in. So a few of you, maybe a little less than 10%, don't do any programs at the current time. 16% do online courses only. So this is Okay, I'm sorry, we're going to close the poll so you can all see the same data that I'm talking about. So 7% say none, 16% are just doing courses only. The group that has just a few programs, 1 to 5 programs, is the biggest group, 38%. And then 6 to 11, we have 9%. 11% have 12 or more programs. So this is a pretty nice mix. Those folks that have 12 or more programs are maybe ones that we can use as consultants on this webinar. You can share with us some of your ideas on how you've built that many programs. And those of you that are just beginning, feel free to ask questions, and maybe we'll get some responses from not just myself, but other folks in the webinar here today. We'll go to the next slide in just a second. So it's kind of background too. I wanted to share with you some case studies. These are 2 institutions that we work with, and they give you different perspectives on how programs or institutions develop their online programs and then how they grew them. So I tried to pick 2 schools that were very similar in terms of their type and their location. These are both faith-based universities. They're comprehensive. They go up through master's degrees. They're in rural areas, 110 to 60 miles away from major cities. The one institution has 3 instructional sites, so they've done a little bit of branching out to other locations. School B has 13, so that's been a strategy they've pursued pretty vigorously, is opening instructional sites in other locations away from their main campus. But now look at the online program. School A was actually doing online programs back in 1996. They had 2 programs in 2002 and also had over 3,000 students enrolled at that time, so they were very successful. This is kind of indicative of that land rush concept I mentioned. This was an early adopter. They were out there first. They had very little competition. In fact, this was basically a national program. It wasn't a regional program because they were one of the first in the country with this degree. And so they enrolled a lot of students. And take it down 10 years, then number of current programs today, they still have those same 2 programs. School A does. And their online enrollments have shrunk from 3,000 down to 850. The other school is a late entrance. If you look at the online programs, they had nothing in 2002. In fact, their first online programs they started just a year and a half ago in 2011, early 2011. And they have 5 programs today. So they've aggressively moved 5 programs. Their plan is by a year from now to have 15 online programs. So they're jumping full force into moving programs online. And they've been pretty successful. To only be at it for a year and a half and have 380 students is pretty good. So we see the School A scenario, we've seen it several times here at the Learning House, where a college was an early adopter and they were quite successful. They built up big programs. But they kind of rested on their laurels. In a sense, it was so easy because they were out there first. There wasn't a lot of competition, and they were able to enroll quite a few students. And but they didn't continue to add programs. They just kept that set of programs, and then more and more schools in their region, in their location, and across the country have come into those same programs. So they've seen their opportunities shrink away. So you don't want to be like School A. You want to be like School B and start adding programs. A word of caution, though, I keep saying this, people may think I'm kind of a crank on this, but this window is open now, it's going to close. Just like the for-profit or the market-driven institutions had this tremendous growth period, then it kind of came to a halt as everything matured and got competitive. I think the same thing's going to happen within your region in the next 5 or 6 years. So get in there quickly, bring your programs, build your offerings and so forth, but expect the fact that other people are going to follow you and it's going to get crowded in the next 4, 5, 6 years, and it's going to be a whole different scenario at that point when there's lots of choices and the competition will get a lot fiercer. So just a word for the wise to think about that, how you're going to plan for the future as well as build your programs now. It's a great opportunity, but it won't be the same opportunity forever. Okay, now I want to show you a slide from the the online college student study, we asked these students which programs they were enrolled in. And these are the top 10 programs, both for undergrad and grad. And this is an important slide to kind of remember if you can. Go down that list of degrees or majors and think about your college or your university. How many of those degrees do you offer currently to your campus-based students, your traditional students? I think many of the institutions on the webinar today will have most of those degrees that you offer on campus. And if you're not sure, it would be good too to check and see how big those programs are. If you go to the College Navigator site, the website, just type in College Navigator, you can look up your school. And this is a service from the U.S. Department of Education. They list every college in America, and they'll have data from your IPEDS report on how many students you have graduating in each of the majors that you offer. So it's a good source. If you don't know it yourself, you don't have to go look it up on your campus. Just go to College Navigator and check and see which programs you offer degrees in and how big they are. Keep this in mind, this set of degrees, the ones that you do have and the ones that you don't have as we go into these 6 strategies now, okay? Let me start with the first one. And these strategies, I try to order them kind of in order of the easiest to do to the hardest. This set of ideas, I think, are the easier ones for you to implement, and they get a little bit tougher as we go towards the 6th overall strategy. So the first thing that's kind of obvious to most people is start with those strong on-campus programs from the top 10 list. So if you have a strong psychology program on campus, that's a very logical program to take online. So go down through your curriculum and the list of top 10 programs, and that's an easy one to pick and choose. Now you want to do market research and things to make sure there's a need out there, but the chances are very good that if you have a strong program on campus within your particular location or locale, that'll also be a strong program online for you. So that's the obvious strategy, is work down and move those over. You already have the courses, you already have the faculty, pretty straightforward. Number 2, add some new programs from that top 10 list. So there's nothing that says you can't add a new degree to your campus. In fact, you can add a new degree that you only do online. We have a partner institution that I've worked with, I believe they're in Georgia. They're launching their first online degree, and it's a degree that they don't have on campus. They kind of went right to number 2 strategy. We don't typically advise that, but in this case, there was a lot of resistance, a lot of concern among the faculty on campus that online wasn't quite as good as face-to-face. There's some skepticism that I'm sure you have on your campus. It happens everywhere. So this institution picked healthcare administration, which is a program they don't have on campus. They hired some really top-notch faculty, some actually part-time faculty who were really expert in this field to help them build the curriculum and the courses. So they're going to launch their first online degree with one that's not on the campus, and avoid all the conflict and the discussion and the debate and the hassle about, well, you can't teach my course online. They just went past all that. So it's not a bad idea, and it's not that difficult to find expertise to help you design the curriculum and the program. It's a pretty comprehensive process, actually. Number 3 strategy along this line is, then you can think about adding niche programs. Just because it's not in the top 10 doesn't mean it may not be a good program for your particular institution. One of the favorite examples I like to share is one of the partner institutions here at the Learning House that has a bachelor's degree in mining. Now, there can't be very many institutions in the U.S. that have a degree in mining, but because of their location, it's a big industry in their region, but they draw students from all over the country for that degree in mining because it's rare. We have another client that I visited not too long ago, this past summer, and they have one of the first degrees they're going to put online, a new partner, is a bachelor's degree in sign language. And they said that they were one of, I believe, 6 colleges in the U.S. that has a bachelor's degree in sign language. So they think there will be a big market for it. They get a lot of requests from people outside their territory for that degree. So look at your programs and see what you have that's maybe a really strong program where you have intellectual expertise and leadership that may be attractive. I remember another institution I've talked with that has a degree in speech pathology that they put online, and they're doing very well with it because nobody else has it, at least in the online environment. many more schools would have that degree on campus. And finally, we have fourth strategy along this line is if you really have some faculty that insist on doing liberal arts degrees, think about mixing them with professional skills. There are a number of schools that have liberal arts degrees like history, sociology, mathematics online, but they tend to be very small, and based on the research that we did, there aren't a lot of students that want those degrees. So one thing I would suggest is mixing those up with professional skills that lead to jobs and careers and advancement, and there may be a good match there. For example, if you have an English degree, why not match it with a certificate in paralegal studies so the person can use their English skills and maybe be a paralegal where you have to have good writing, for example. So you can think about ways that you can mix certificates or specialty areas with a liberal arts degree that may be very marketable, because we all know that liberal arts is important. All the surveys I've seen of business leaders, when they're asked what skills do you want in a future employee with a college education, they say writing, thinking, working in teams, being able to appreciate diversity, do research, all the skills that you learn in the liberal arts. So they're very practical. It's just that you don't have the right major or the credentials for a particular job. Okay, this is at the end of kind of strategy number one. I want to pause here and see, especially on this topic, if some of you folks on the webinar today have some ideas about this, some other suggestions, ways to expand the degree offerings that you have into that online space. I'm going to take a minute. Raise your hand if you want to have the mic and can talk. We'll recognize you, or if you want to type in a question or comment. I'm going to pause and encourage you to share your ideas here. Some of you folks that have more than 11 programs online, tell us how you did it, or how you decided which programs to take online. Okay, we have a person we're going to shift the microphone to. Mike, are you there? Hello? I think we lost you. Keep trying this. If you want to raise your hand and make a comment, feel free to do so. We do have one question or a comment. We have an online digital media skills program through American University. Jody, are you raising your hand to speak here? Let's try and see if you can talk to us about this program. Jody, are you
Sure.
there?
Yes. Okay. Do I have that? Okay, great. Yeah, I just wanted to touch base. I mean, the main reason we decided for this program, to be online is that a lot of our journalists and people from other fields were asking about digital media skills specifically now that, we're a school of communication, and so a lot of journalism, as you know, has gone online, and people are, doing a lot more web development and trying to figure out, kind of how to bridge that gap. So that was, our first certificate to go online, and we launched almost a year ago.
That's a great suggestion. Thank you for sharing that. So you may have a liberal arts type degree or even a degree in a professional field like journalism, but you want to marry it with that skill set. It reminds me of a ton of. Yep. Go ahead. Do you want to say something?
Right. I mean, we've seen people from a mix of backgrounds for this program because it's so, kind of cutting edge, frontier. I think we've had people, everything from, the World Bank to journalism to, the social media manager for their office that just sort of wants to learn more. So I think it was, a number of people from different fields came in, and, a lot of offices have like a web developer, but they don't have a lot of people in the office that can do this sort of job. So I think people transitioning careers as well, but it was just the need in the market and kind of responding to, the feedback we were getting about what students wanted.
Mm-hmm. Do you offer that as a certificate? How many courses in the certificate?
It's 5 courses, so it's about a year long. Each course is 9 weeks. So it's fairly fast paced, and the idea with adult learners is, if you set them up for these very long online programs, sometimes it's harder to keep them in. So the idea with a year-long program was, you know, to make it fast-paced enough to, you know, kind of keep up with their busy lives as well.
Sure, great idea. You know, it reminds me, I have a son-in-law, he's a music teacher. He teaches at a charter school in Minneapolis. But Matt is very good with computer design, web design skills. He's designed a website for his school, you know, and he could make a living as a web designer if he wanted to. Now, he picked up those skills on his own, but it's a great combination. You think of a web designer and a musician, because he can use it in a lot of different ways. Yeah, thanks, Jody. I appreciate the comment. We have a question now. Emily?
We have a question. Is there a preferred rate about adding programs? This person is concerned about adding too fast. They're going to have 5 programs in only 2 to 3 months, and will add 2 more in just a few more months.
Yeah, that seems pretty fast. I'm impressed if you can do that. You know, the question is really a question of resources. If you have the resources to do this, and you can do it well, there's no limit on how many you can add. I was the provost at Walden, the chief academic officer at Walden University, a large market-driven institution. We would add anywhere from 8 to 12 new programs per year. And the limitation for us, we had, you know, each school was kind of lining up to add new degrees in their particular school or college. The limitation in some cases was having kind of room in the process to train the admissions counselors and other people to handle all those new degrees. And so we had to go through a schedule of once a quarter. We would add new degrees every quarter, and we would schedule 2 or 3 or 4. You also have to update your catalog and get all the policies and stuff in place for these new degrees. So publishing the catalog, and we did an addendum then, was one of the more the barriers to adding lots and lots of degrees, because you had to kind of keep that going. So we had a steady process where every 3 months, every quarter, we're adding a new set of degrees and a new addendum to the catalog, and changing the website and changing everything else, marketing materials that go with it. So it's not just about building the courses and making sure you have faculty, but it's all the other stuff that supports that from the university that could slow you down a little bit. Yeah. Hey, thanks for your comment. That's a good comment coming in, and a good, somebody else raising their hand? Okay, let's try Carol Gossett. Carol, are you there? Testing. Carol? Lost Carol.
We have a few more questions. David File asks, how is the ongoing state authorization approval process affecting strategic planning and growth in online programming?
David, you always ask the hardest questions. This is good. For those that, I think most of you in this call would know, state authorization is a concern. When you add an online program in any field, you have to comply with the state regulations wherever you enroll students. And so it's an ongoing issue. And in most cases, if you have authority from a state, you don't need to get additional authority every time you add a new program. But there's probably a few states that actually go so far as to make you notify them or do something every time you have a new program. I haven't actually looked at the 50 state regs myself to know, but I'm guessing there's got to be a few states that would at least require notification. So that's something to pay attention to. The best resource I could guide you to is the SHEO website. That's SHEEO, the State Higher Ed Executive Officers Organization. Has a good comprehensive list of all 50 states and what's required in those states, so you can at least check there and see what's required. In most cases, you need initial authorization, but there may be a few that require authorization for every new program, in which case you probably want to batch them up and do them as a group. One more question, then we're going to go on.
Neil asks, how has everyone rethought the contact hour requirement typically found in face-to-face programs?
That's a good question. We actually talked about this one in a webinar, I think, a couple months ago, Neil, but I'll take a quick answer. If you do the calculation with the Department of Ed has required with the Carnegie units, you need to figure out how much time your students are spending in these online classes and see if it meets the Carnegie requirement. That's typically 3 hours of contact time or student work time over 15 weeks for every credit. So it's 45 hours per credit. And you can check and see if your students are doing that. Many institutions are building their courses with guidelines that would say X number of pages of reading would typically take the average student X amount of hours. And so they're kind of calculating to see if there's enough workload in their courses to get the 45 hours per credit. Some schools are actually using less than 45 because they figure it's a 50-minute hour for contact period like you do on campus, so they cut it down to 37 and a half to make that match up. But that's about as light as you can go, I think. Other institutions that have the same course online and on ground with identical outcomes and identical student assignments and work make the case that our on-ground class meets all the requirements. It's Carnegie Unit kind of qualified. So if we're doing the exact same teaching and the same content and the same student outcomes and assignments online, it's got to be equivalent learning. So those are the two ways I know of. Let's go on to strategy number 2. And you guys keep the questions coming. We'll try to get your questions and comments as well as my ideas here. So the second big strategy has to do with adding programs, or at least adding variations of programs, is to build what I call curriculum ladders. So the pie chart on the right there is the slide out of the Aslanian market research study that I quoted earlier. Fully 25% of the current students that we surveyed don't want degrees. They're in for certificates or licenses or shorter-term programs, and that's something that the nonprofit universities tended to go light on, but the market-driven were much heavier on, so it's kind of a clue to take from their success. So I recommend you start with the bottom of the ladder with a certificate. 4 courses, maybe 5 courses, maybe 3. Some students just want that many courses. They can commit to that much money, that much time, and it gets them something good in the marketplace. For instance, I was in St. Paul, Minnesota recently. We have a partner there. They were doing a campus event to recruit students, and I went to the event to meet some of their students, and I sat beside a young lady who was thinking about getting some work in accounting. She worked as an account manager in a business there. She had no college credits, but she had attended a business school where she got some work in accounting. And as I talked with her, a typical kind of student, she had a cousin that had gone to this university, so she felt comfortable. She drove by it every day, and it's that local reputation, even though she wanted to go online. But she wasn't ready to do a degree. She said, if I could just get a certificate, maybe 4 courses, that would be a great start for me. And then if she likes it, maybe she'll go on and commit to the longer-term degree. So start with a certificate, then think about an associate's degree. Many of you folks have bachelor's degrees, but you don't offer an associate's degree. You've already got all the courses. They're in your catalog. You've already developed. If you're doing a bachelor's degree online, I think it's a very good strategy to just break that in half, so to speak, and do an associate's degree too, because some students would commit to that where they won't commit to a bachelor's degree. So if you have a certificate and an associate, do another advanced certificate, you know, with more higher-end concentration courses, so it's maybe a specialty area, like this one lady in accounting, and then do your bachelor's degree. So as you start stair-stepping this up, you can see how they can go little chunks at a time. And if you have a bachelor's degree, the logical follow-on is a certificate, a 500-level certificate, 4 courses. Maybe some of your bachelor's grads will come back, or maybe new students from somewhere else that want that master's degree but don't want to commit to it fully yet will do that certificate for a job advancement or something. And then you do the master's degree, and then you add a postmaster's certificate, and then you add a doctorate. And I realized that I forgot to add a postdoc certificate on here. That's not a bad idea. But many of you, too, I want to call out the doctoral degree. I think I came across our first partner institution that's doing an EDD degree online, but over 100 institutions that we work with, many have a lot of degrees, and that's the first one that's doing a doctoral degree online. I think that there's a lot of opportunity for institutions, especially in the professional doctorates, the EDD, the DBA in business, the Doctor of Nursing Practice. Those are all good degrees, and if you have bachelor's and master's degrees in those fields, there's no reason why you can't invest a little bit of faculty time and effort, go through the accreditation process, and offer that doctoral degree. Because they're so few and far between, You have a couple of market-driven institutions, Walden, where I used to work, and Capella. Otherwise, it's pretty open space there for those kind of degrees. We're going to stop now and take a couple questions, or anybody want to raise their hand and talk about building curriculum ladders or expanding in this way? Some of you submit questions and I don't get to them as we go through the presentation. That's why we stay for a half hour after 2 o'clock so we can take care of as many of them as possible then. We'll go on to the third general strategy then. Wait, we got one person going to ask a question.
Yeah, I have a question. This is Rob.
Yeah, go ahead.
What about ladder degrees going the other way, like doing online courses for high schools and cyber schools as opposed to starting and going up? Maybe going where you are and going down.
That's my next strategy, Rob. You got to slow down a little bit. Yeah,
all right.
It's a good idea. I mean, when you think about, you can also drop down even below the college range to high school students, and that's a strategy that's on the list here coming up. Good point. Do you do that, Rob, at your school now?
No, we don't. But we're talking about dual enrollment, and so one of the questions is, how do you do that, and then you develop solid candidates to come, to your campus for the traditional undergrad or even online.
Yeah, it's a nice recruiting tool for your traditional students, but many states have these dual enrollment programs now where there's even some state dollars behind it, but you don't have to rely on that. You can offer degree and market it or communicate it to prospective high school students in the area, especially people that are in your funnel, maybe juniors that have already expressed an interest in your institution. Offer them an online class and make it cheap enough that it's not that big a deal, and they get credits from your institution. They're a much more likely candidate to enroll when they graduate. One more question here.
Diane wants to know, she says, I see license on the chart. Do you have ideas for this area?
Yeah, that's a good point. Typically the license issues are in fields like education or maybe in IT where you get Microsoft license as a Microsoft certified engineer and so forth. We see it mostly in our partner institutions in the education area. Like there's a school I work with that has a reading licensure program online. It's 4 courses, leads to a special reading endorsement for current teachers. It's a very popular program. So licensure in fields like that where there's some kind of state regulation typically. Okay, we're going to go on to the third strategy now. This is serving on-ground students. Again, this is a little bit tougher, but not too tough to do. So many of our partners, those of you that there are about 15% of the schools on the call today that are just doing a few courses online, you haven't started your first fully online program. Summer Gen Ed courses is a really nice place to start. You can offer a half a dozen courses that are broad spectrum courses that many of your students need to take. Offer it when they're home in the summer, and that will keep them from attending the local community college or a local college back home and getting credits and transferring them back in the fall. You get a chance to get your feet wet, they stay on your Gen Ed program. And we have a number of schools that do this, it works well. Some schools have actually calculated the amount of transfer credit that's coming in September and October, and they've cut that dramatically. So instead of leaking that revenue out, they're retaining it themselves. We have another school that I heard about, the Indiana school, that took this one step further, and they offer a more complete set of courses each summer. Still typically a lot of Gen Ed, but it's enough that a student can get 2 full semesters worth of work in 2 summers. So they can take a full 4 courses, 12 credits, even when they're home, living with mom and dad and whatever. That effectively cuts the bachelor's degree to 3 years because they do the 6 years or 6 semesters on campus and 2 in the summers in between. It's a great concept in the day and age when people are concerned about money and high cost of tuition, and it doesn't cost you hardly anything to provide that program. The next idea here is study abroad. We have schools that send students, abroad for a semester. If you do online degree or courses, they can continue to take their home courses and not get behind when they do a special program like that. Some of you offer winter terms or J terms. Again, a student could be home and do this, or they could go to a different part of the country, maybe do an internship but still take a course for credit if you squeeze it down to 4 weeks. And this was an interesting case. I was with one of our partner institutions in a rural western state, and they're in a rural location in a western state, and they recruit athletes heavily. That's one of their main strategies to grow their on-campus programs. And so maybe 60–70% of their student body were athletes. And in sports like baseball and basketball, where there's lots of games, these students, and you're 300 miles away from the closest competitor, they're on the road a lot. And so they were using their online courses to make it easier on their athletes to not miss class. I thought it was a great use of online courses. And then another institution that we work with hit on this idea of identifying students who had dropped out just short of graduation. They went back through their alumni records and found students that needed 30 or less credits, and then 20 or less. They ranked them by the fewest amount of credits that they needed, and then they reached out to those students and said, hey, would you like to finish your degree? We have some online courses now. You don't have to come back to campus. Wherever you are, you can do these classes. What a nice thing. They got some really great responses, thank you from students that gave them that opportunity. It's a really nice win-win for everybody. Let's go back. I skipped past it. Any comments or questions before we get on to this next particular strategy? You want to comment on how to broaden your appeal to your on-ground students? Okay, we'll go on then, no problem. So number 4, again, gets a little bit more difficult to do this one. But think about where your alumni are in 2 places, where they are degree-wise, content, and where they are with instructional sites, or where they are physically. A really logical thing to do is if you have a really strong bachelor's degree on campus where you've had lots of graduates that are out there in the world doing their work, develop a master's degree in that field and offer it online, and you have this pent-up demand of students that are waiting. They're your favorite, or they like you because that's where they got their degree from to start with, and they'll often come back to their alma mater if they have an opportunity to do that master's degree to kind of top off what they learned there on campus. So building a master's degree, if you don't have it, and taking it online will really service your alumni, and it's easy to find these people. Many of them, you have their address and email, so you can get a hold of them. Another strategy that one of our partners is pursuing is they know that a lot of their alumni, most schools can do a scattergram and find all their alumni and plot them on a map. They know that they have a large concentration of alumni in a particular city, or maybe a couple cities. Think about opening an instructional site there, because you remember, they're connected to your institution as alumni, but also if there's a physical presence, it makes a difference in the attractiveness. So, a place where they could go get help with questions and so forth. So putting a site where you have large concentrations of alumni is something I think is worth pursuing. Got some questions, Emily?
No.
No?
Oh, wait, yes, we do.
Okay. Ellen?
Hi, this is Eileen.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
Yeah.
In order to add instructional sites and locations, don't you have to go through a very extensive approval process in order to operate physically in that site? I know we talked about state authorization, but isn't that quite an onerous process? You can't just put them up, right?
I'm most familiar with the Higher Learning Commission. I spent most of my career with the Higher Learning Commission schools, the North Central Association. There, if you do less than 5 courses, there's not an issue. But as soon as you offer more than 5 courses at a location. Yeah, you're right that you have 2 issues. You have state issues. If you go across the state line to another state, you may have to go through authorization for a physical location. And then your regional accrediting body will have rules and regs governing opening new sites. Okay. And, onerous is in the eyes of the beholder. If it's just and the Higher Learning Commission, again, has about 3 different levels of sites. They have fully fledged branch campuses, instructional sites, and they work their way down. It's less difficult, the fewer programs, the fewer courses you're going to offer. But there, yeah, there is a process. You have to go through it. That's why this one's kind of lower on the list. It takes more time to open an instructional site somewhere. And you have to do a little bit more due diligence about what's it going to cost, and can we afford the rent or the physical space, as well as are there students in the area that may want some face-to-face classes as well as online.
Okay, thank you.
Good point. Thanks for raising it. We're going to talk about it more, actually, in our last strategy.
A couple of people, just to follow up on that, have agreed. Charlene says that Saks is very strict about off-site locations, and Carol says that in California, WASC has a very strict process as well.
Yeah, don't just open a site. Definitely go through your regional accreditor and make sure you know what they're doing. Talk with your liaison officer. But I'll show you in a minute. It's a strategy that some institutions have pursued very successfully. Let's go on to number 5 now. So there are other populations. Here's the one that we had earlier, the suggestion. Go to advanced high school students. What a great idea, especially if you're in small towns and rural areas where high schools don't offer a full complement of courses for advanced students. If you offer a college course to them, they can stay in high school, do the sports and the social thing, but get college credits before they graduate. And again, there are some states that promote this, and they have articulation agreements and rules about it, but you can always do it. If you're not using state money, you can enroll students as you want to. So it's definitely something to think about. I think it builds up your regular campus programs. The next idea is think about students from competitors. We talked about summer gen eds. We have a partner institution in a large East Coast city that found out if they advertised their online classes, a lot of students took them that were home for the summer when they had gone away to college somewhere else. So they were, in a sense, robbing college students from other colleges that were home for the summer using their online programs. So it kind of works both ways. And then finally, I saw an article recently, this was actually research done in England, but it said that more and more older folks, 50 and above retirees, were not just learning to use computers anymore, but they were actually using computers to learn. And they were going to school. Some of them were retooling for careers. Some of them were doing it just for engagement and for their own personal satisfaction. But I think there's an opportunity there. Again, you may have, most of them, I'm guessing, would not be interested in degrees, but certificates in particular fields that would enhance their job skills or just be of interest to them. Something to think about. And those people are already there. You already have the courses. We're going to go to the last overall strategy, and this is one we just talked about a little bit. Add instructional sites. I'm actually at the Learning House corporate headquarters in Louisville. We visited with a school today here in Louisville that has 15 instructional sites across 4 states, and they've been doing this for 20-something years. Gradually adding, one state, 4 or 5 locations, go to another state, 4 or 5 locations. So they've gradually built this up. We have several partner institutions at the Learning House that have 10 or more instructional sites like this where they've built them up. And they've learned how to do this. They figured out the right demographics, the right characteristics of a town, and they're gradually expanding out from their campus to bigger and bigger territories, crossing state lines. One of the large market-driven institutions, Strayer University, has pursued this strategy for some time. Strayer began as a small family-owned business school in the Washington, Baltimore area, and they gradually started expanding, and now they're out just crossing the Mississippi River. So they've been very deliberate, opened 5 or 6 sites a year, and they kind of built up the expertise and the knowledge on how to do that. So some of the nonprofit, mission-driven institutions are adopting that same strategy. And it's a great way to build your online programs because, again, think of the quote here from the research study about 80% attend a campus or a center within 100 miles of where they live. So if you're in a small area or maybe an area without a lot of density and population, you can open a branch campus or an instructional site in a city nearby and you expand your area. You have to do some marketing, obviously, to let people know you have a site there, but that campus starts to become a known quantity, and and people recognize you and you're in the areas, so you can keep kind of leapfrogging out and get a bigger footprint. This is the last of my 6 strategies. I'm going to just put them all up here for you so you can kind of remember back what we talked about. Again, I think I kind of started with the ones that were the easiest and down to the 6th one. That's pretty hard to open instructional sites. It takes more time and longer-term view. But we have a few minutes left here. I'm anxious to get questions now on any one of the strategies there, how you folks did it, or if you have a question, let's hear them.
Earlier, Mike had asked a really good question about if state authorizations were required just for online courses or just for online programs.
That's a good question, Mike. Again, I'm not an expert on state authorization. My understanding is that some states, even if it's just a set of courses, require you to get authorized and go through the approval process in their state. The states run the gamut on this, folks. Some states are very rigid. My home state where I live, Minnesota, is very rigid. They want you to go through any time you're enrolling a student in that state, and it's expensive and takes some time. There are other states that are wide open. They really don't care what you do unless you build a campus in their state, and then they want to get involved. So you really need to go state by state and figure out what those authorizations are. So I recommend you use the SHIO site, and you can check out any one state and see what they require. There are some efforts underway. A couple of organizations are working to build consortia where there's reciprocity. So they're trying to get an agreement where maybe 25 or 30 states would all agree to reciprocity, so you don't have to go state by state. I'll give a little editorial here. This is an example of regulation that backfired because the Department of Ed was putting this regulation in place to try to slow down some of these large market-driven institutions that were going nationally and growing very fast. So they said make sure you get state authorization in every state. And it was designed to rein those students in a little bit, in my understanding. Those institutions are large enough, they can hire a team of lawyers and go to all 50 states and do what they need to do and keep track of it. So it hasn't caused them a hiccup. But smaller institutions, like many of you folks on this call today, are hit by this through no fault of your own when you don't want to go out and hire lawyers to go through state by state. If you have a good program, maybe a degree in mining that attracts students from all 50 states, then it's an onerous deal to have to get authorized in all 50 states to offer that particular program. So it kind of backfired. I think some of these consortia ideas will come to fruition in the next couple years, and it'll be much easier to just agree to do things a certain way, and then you'll get approval from maybe 20, 30 states all at once. But it's an issue to deal with until then.
Eileen has something.
Eileen, let's go.
Yes, I'm very interested in what kinds of structures you've seen within universities to promote this online growth of programs. You know, is it marketing that takes the lead? Is it some structure that's a collaborative structure? The online learning as a modality impacts and is involved in so many areas. It's academic affairs, it's course development, it's technology. I was just curious if you could, you know, give me your advice or others that have done this successfully. What's the internal structure look like to support this?
Two quick answers. First, it comes from different sources. Sometimes we work with partners in universities where faculty are involved and they start building their own online courses, and it kind of bubbles up from the bottom. Other places where the president gets excited and leads the initiative and pushes it through, and it kind of works top down. I actually gave a webinar 2 months ago. It's in the archives on this very topic, organization and structure for successful online programs. So the long answer is go to the website and look through that webinar And we'll have a white paper on it here pretty soon. But you want to create, in a quick answer, you need a dedicated leader, a person that reports at least to the provost, if not the president, that heads up online. These are schools that do it successfully and do it well. Person with academic credentials and at least dean level status to be in charge of your online programs, and they're accountable for those programs. They need their own marketing budget, separate from the main university, college. They need their own enrollment staff because enrollment is very hard to do face-to-face and online. It's different skill set, different tools, and so forth. They actually really need, too, their own faculty or faculty supervision, so you can avoid the fight with faculty that don't want to teach online. You can just hire other people as long as they have the right credentials and you supervise them well and so forth. Those are the key services that need to be discrete. Think of it as building another campus of the university in maybe a location 500 miles away, all the stuff that you need to run that branch campus successfully. You're going to build an online campus of the university. If you think of it that way, I think you'll be much further ahead. We have institutions that have been with us for 5 or 6 years and have a smattering of students and don't do it very well. And it's usually because of the organizational piece, that they're just not dedicated and carving out that kind of responsibility. The ones that do it well do something like that. And then they have a governance decision where they really decide that the faculty own the curriculum and the faculty control the quality of the courses, but the faculty don't have the prerogative to decide where and how to deliver those courses. Once you cross that key decision, everything gets a lot easier.
Thank you. So if I go on your website, you have that webinar?
Yeah, the webinar is recorded there, and you can see the slides and hear me ramble on.
Thank you so much, David.
Sure. Yeah, okay. Well, folks, that's bringing us to the end of our time here today. I want to thank you very much. I mentioned that we do these webinars every month. The one coming up is with our Executive VP for marketing. He's a real expert in this area. I could go on and on about Todd's qualifications, but you'll get a lot of good ideas on how to communicate. So I've told you how to build and expand your programs. He's going to tell you how to market them better. And then coming up shortly after this will be one on how to retain your students. So we'll share our best ideas about that. Thanks very much for participating today. We appreciate your interest. And again, this will be available pretty quickly here so you can get copies of this. I'll stay around now for the next half hour, so if some of you want to keep asking questions or commenting or doing the phone thing, we can do it.
Jody, you've been patiently waiting. What question do you have?
I just wanted to comment on that piece about the licensure for states. We are from American University, so in theory we are a larger university, but we do actually have to go through, without lawyers, we just have one staff member at the university that's working on each and every licensure. So we've actually filled out state, requirement forms for a number of states, and we're at like 46 of 50 states at the moment. So we're going through that process as well, and any reciprocity would be greatly appreciated, but we have not encountered that yet.
Jody, while you're on the line, we actually have a participant who had a question for you from your comment earlier.
He was just wondering about your certificate program, if it was a part of the liberal arts degree or if it was a standalone certificate.
Sure. It's a standalone graduate level certificate, so it's offered, within the Graduate School of Communication here. We're, working on, that's something that, I think certificates are now recognized, throughout the U.S., but we're just having a hard time, honestly, with international students because it's just, sort of a newer brand name degree, I think, to have a certificate. So it is a standalone graduate certificate.
Jody, just one comment too, you've probably already done this, but certificates, folks, remember, with the change in the U.S. Department of Education regulations, certificates need to be approved by the department if they're using Title IV funds or eligible for Title IV funds. That was, again, part of all these new regulations they put in place to kind of rein in the market-driven institutions. So any certificates that get Title IV aid need to go through this approval process with the department. It's not too difficult, but it's back to this gainful employment issue because a certificate can lead to a different job. They want to be able to track it and make sure that students aren't getting gouged for high prices for degrees or programs or certificates that don't really pay off in the marketplace. Jody, I had a question. You've been through 44 state applications. Can you give us an idea of what percentage of somebody's time that's taken or how many hours it's actually taken you to go through and do all that?
Yeah, so at the moment we have the special assistant to the vice provost is actually our sort of, state aficionado. So what he does is he actually goes through the process and then he sends us, what has to be completed on our end, which is usually information about curriculum revision and faculty selections and, just kind of the nitty-gritty things that, can't usually be answered necessarily by the provost's office. And we haven't, when it's transferable enough from the information that he has, we don't even see some of those forms, to be honest. I've only probably seen a few of them, and, if it's newer, if it's information that he doesn't have access to, that's when it comes our way. I think it's a matter of, we don't have the lawyers on it, but we do have, this is, it's not the only part of his job, but it is, I know, a significant part of his time, when it does come down to these. And once he got them, it's just a matter of, I think, being up to date. Some of it is honestly, we have to make sure that we put that information on our website because you have to make sure that your policies as far as refunds and, are basically matched. So if I have a student from Maryland, the refund policy actually has to match that student's state versus the university, which can get, very confusing. So we've tried to update our language on the site to make sure, because if Maryland checks, our site, we have to be transparent about that it's a different policy, and, we can't hide that. So that's something that, we're still sort of, trying to figure out exactly how to, be the most transparent and make sure that we're following all of those guidelines from, the many states. Most states are more, they just want to make sure that, you're not just sort of a, degree mill, really. So we just have to prove that piece of it more than anything else. Some are very specific about, trying to match up with their guidelines. But on the gainful employment note, we are in the process of applying for financial aid, which can be, I've heard, sort of, more of a lengthy process for non-traditional programs. And so I had heard that they've updated the gainful employment piece of it. We had to fill it out when we filed, but I wasn't sure if that was something, because so many of these programs are new, it seems difficult to prove gainful employment, when you don't have a graduated class yet.
Yeah, good point. Thank you for sharing that. That's very helpful. Yeah, think about this, folks. If you've filled out 5 or 6 state applications, you start to see the same questions over and over again. So once you've filled out that many, you probably don't have to get a lot of new research each time you hit another state. Jody, can you answer the question that somebody asked earlier? Do you have to refile with the state typically if you add new programs, or once you get authorized, you just add programs as you want on top of your original authorization?
That is a good question. I imagine at the moment, because our, assistant to the vice provost has been doing it, I imagine because we have several online universities, it's probably just a matter of, notifying them which programs. My guess is you don't have to fill out a separate organization or application. I think you would just have to let them know, but it might be a matter of, because each program's different, they might still need the paperwork, as far as, just having that on file. So I don't fully know the answer to that, but, my guess is it actually is program specific, in that you would have to let them know, what the program is, so that they would have that on file. And then also, if they did have questions, because we've had to go through this very lengthy, I've seen these applications, and it's so many questions that we've filled out about, faculty, curriculum revisions. So they might actually need a separate form for each one, but it's possible that once you have licensure, it would just be a matter of, submitting that form with the information. So that is something I would have to ask our special assistant.
Okay, Thank you. We have another question from David File now, from David from Iowa Wesleyan. You got the floor, Dave.
Yeah, thank you. Another state authorization question regarding resources as well. Is there, I know there isn't really an average, but what kind of fees would one expect to pay as far as being licensed or authorized in various states?
I have no idea, David. Let's open up. Jody, you or Eileen, you've got some, perhaps some background on this. You have any idea of what it costs or what the charges are in different states? I understand that it varies considerably from zero.
Yeah, my experience is that it varies. I mean, some are nothing, some are 1,000. I think it just really varies. I don't have enough experience to know average for the whole country, though.
Okay. David, again, go to that SHIELD site, and it lists there the fees for each of these states.
All right, thank you.
Sure thing.
Yep.
We have a typing or chat question now.
Well, this is really a comment, but Diane says that she thinks the comment about the 5 courses at a site is a good one and might be especially important in starting on the expansion strategy. Yeah,
that's the regulation I know for the Higher Learning Commission North Central, that once you cross 5 courses, you have to get approval from them. And, you know, this, folks, this is when you start adding sites, like I mentioned, schools that do this quite a lot. It's similar to when you first add online degrees. The first time you file with your regional accrediting body, you do your first online degree, they'll send a team in. Typically, you have to write this substantive change request and so forth. And then the second time, maybe they won't send a team, and then the third time, it's a different level of review. But it works its way up with new programs that you'll get to a point where you can just notify them that you're going to add more programs. But they keep a tighter leash on you as you're doing your first couple, and then when you get big enough and have enough online degrees, they'll back off. The same thing works with these instructional sites. The first one gets a lot of scrutiny. They'll send a team out. They'll do a follow-up report, all kinds of things. Then the second one's a little bit easier, the third one, and then they start saying anywhere in the state you can do a site if you want to, and then it just works its way up. It's the same process. They want to make sure you know what you're doing, that you're careful, that you do it well, and then they gradually give you more autonomy to do that.
Ruth was wondering if anyone has packaged their online curriculum to sell to another institution.
Whoa. I don't know if any universities are doing that. Some of the publishers, I know Pearson has some products, some curriculum type products that schools have adopted. I think Arizona State University, I read, is using some remedial courses in partnership with Pearson Publishing. Maybe some of you folks on the line here know of other examples. That's a good question you could do some research on. But I don't think it's very common. Schools, I've known a number of instances where schools do a dual degree, where they'll share courses, like half the courses from one university and half from the other, and you get a degree from both or one, where they kind of share curriculum. But I don't know where they actually sell it, personally.
And then we have one more question where Gary says that how do you determine what your price should be when you're creating new online classes and programs, especially with strategies 1 and 2, since there's so much competition?
And we actually had another participant wondering if we could do a poll of the people and the tuition they charge per credit hour. I don't know if we have time to do that, if we should do that in a future webinar.
We may do that in a future one. I can give you some average numbers. We did some research here not long ago that the nonprofit institutions are pushing $500 an hour on average, and the nonprofit mission-driven institutions are down between $300 and $400. It's a typical undergraduate per credit price, and some that are at the low end of that, down below $300, you know, $275 and so forth. So that gives you some ranges. The best thing that we do when we work with our partners is we look at competitors within their region, and it's easy to find price information. So the most obvious answer is see what the competition is charging within your region. And again, back to that market research study that we did, online college students 2012, one of the questions we asked were, what are the key factors that influenced your decision to select a school? The number one response was reputation, and I think a lot of that has to do with the local institution that's been there 100 years and has accreditation, and known quantity equals reputation. But the second one was price. The price is a key factor for these students that come online, because most of them come for career advancement, and they're interested in improving their financial situation or professional situation, so money's important to them. So it's not to say that other things like customer service and quality of faculty and courses aren't important as well, but those are the top two responses. And so you want to see what the competition is charging, obviously. My advice would be not to be the highest, if you can help it, but be towards the low end. I think this is going to change dramatically also over the next 5 years. As more and more institutions move into this marketplace, they're going to compete on price. Most of our partner institutions at the Learning House charge the same as they do for a regular on-ground face-to-face class. They just keep the tuition equal. And to be real frank, it doesn't cost as much to deliver an online course. If you actually break out the expenses to run an online campus versus an on-ground campus, the online campuses with that same tuition rate are generating big margins and big surpluses in a sense. And I think you're going to see more and more schools competing on the basis of price and not just keeping it the same as their traditional face-to-face program. And there's some examples of that. Some of you may have heard of the company called Straighterline. Straighterline is not an accredited institution, but they have 40 courses, going to be 60 here pretty soon, they say, that are all reviewed for credit by the American Council on Education, and many colleges accept their credits now. And they basically, it's an independent study model, charge $99 a course. So that's pretty cheap. There's another market-driven institution called New Charter University. It's been in the news lately. Their prices are down around $200 per credit hour. And so, I know maybe it's $200 per course. That's a 3-credit course, I believe. So you're going to see more and more experiments like that in institutions trying to go on the kind of discount end and pass those savings on to students. So just a word for the wise again, 5 years from now, if you're the leading provider of a set of degrees in your region, you're going to get a lot of competition. Somebody's going to undercut you on price. It's just invariable that will happen. Any other questions? Well, I see that we still have a pretty good sized group of people that are on the line still. I'll wait just a minute to see if anybody wants to make a comment or ask a question. If not, we'll wrap it up. Well, again, thank you for coming. We appreciate your interest, and take a note here and check out Todd Zipper in January. I'm sure it'll be a very interesting webinar that you'll learn a lot. And I wish you well as you build your online programs and take good care of your students. Goodbye.